and how these decisions are corresponding with the international law and international agreements. 9. A re-examination of modern anti-Semitism in the Christian and Muslim worlds, the link between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, a re-examination of Islamic fundamentalism and its expression in Islamic countries and in countries with large Muslim communities, like France, for instance. This anti-Semitism is expressed in unprecedented propaganda in books, on websites, in sermons in mosques, and even in numerous publications of the protocols of the Elders of Zion. The theater must deal with the specific threats of the Islamic terror organization to Jewish targets worldwide. Denial of the Holocaust is also part and parcel of modern anti-Semitism, and the Jewish theater must deal with it by examining the Jewish Holocaust in Europe as a major historical phenomena from which the world must learn an immediate lesson. 10. The theater must continue to examine the way in which the Jewish historical memory is sustained in its broadest context in Jewish communities worldwide and in Israel. The Jewish historical conscience is a powerful lever in deciphering the present and our responsibility towards it. The examination of historical memory as a focal point in Jewish identity includes an examination of the use of historical Jewish languages, Yiddish and Ladino, and also an examination of the connection between Jewish culture and the Hebrew language. As noted earlier, these themes are framework for a discussion on the particular stream of Jewish political theater. As I've already stated, this discussion must be held with a dialectical linkage to a discussion on the global stream. I will now move on to the global stream and propose 4 general themes for that discussion. 1. The Jewish theater must deal with the global political events from both a historical and contemporary viewpoint and follow the macro-political changes taking place in the world, from the collapse of the Soviet Union through the rise of nationalism in Eastern and Central Europe to China's increasing economic and political power. Such macro-political changes are likely to cause, for example, the decline of the American empire and the strengthening of other political, economic, and military forces that are likely to influence the development of Jewish communities worldwide. The theater must deal with these changes not only out of concern for the fate of the Jewish communities, but also from the more general perspective of human rights under these changing regimes. The Jewish theater must also deal with human rights in the developed Western countries that abolish some of these rights as part of the fight against global terror, as happened in Guantanamo, for example. 2. The Jewish theater must deal with the process of political, economic, and cultural globalization and examine whether it embodies exploitation of the periphery by the Western conglomerates in a way that creates prosperity for a small minority by exploiting billions of poverty-stricken Asians, Africans, and South Americans. It must also examine the division of wealth in the developed societies and the attitudes towards the poor and the foreign workers living in them. I'm sure the American society is very preoccupied with this today. It must assist in controlling the globalization process to ensure that particular cultures in the weaker European, African, Asian, and South American societies will not be assimilated and destroyed. 3. The Jewish theater must deal with a process known as the clash of civilization. I'm sure all of you have heard it, and create possibilities of dialogue between these clashing civilizations. Such a dialogue is likely to turn the clash into a constructive competition that will bring progress instead of destruction. It is precisely in this sphere that the theater can make a significant contribution by presenting the other from the different civilization as a multidimensional character with human needs and legitimate aspirations, thus creating an inter-civilization dialogue on the basis of knowledge and understanding, not ignorance and insensitivity. The Jewish theater must also deal with the implications of regional wars that result from this clash of civilization, like the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, for example. 4. The Jewish theater must deal with the fate of endangered non-Jewish communities, particularly those threatened by genocide. The bitter experience of the Jewish people in World War II should have ensured that Jewish individuals and institutions participate in the defense of societies that were in danger of annihilation in Cambodia, Sarajevo, and Rwanda. Today, too, Jewish theater must take part in the struggle to save civilians in Darfur and Indonesia. The list of particularist and global themes I have mentioned here is broad and comprehensive. It can, in fact, include almost any political subject worthy of a play. The multiplicity of subjects in this list is also its weakness. It is not restricted to a small number of subjects and does not prioritize them. Yet, I hope that this list is internalized by theater management, by theater institutions, playwrights, directors, and actors, and that in the end, the Jewish theater will be able to stage political plays inspired by some of these themes. But the large number of subjects has a further, no less important objective that is connected with the special demographic situation of the Jewish people. Jews began their dispersal throughout the world on the day that Jacob and his 11 sons went down into Egypt around 1700 BC. That is to say, some 3,700 years ago. Their dispersal in the world, on one hand, and their maintaining of a clear national identity on the other, turned the Jewish people into a unique phenomena. This is not the place to discuss the numerous aspects of this phenomena, but still I would like to mention one of them. From time immemorial, Jews have been agents of change and progress throughout the world. Progress that began with the development of the idea of monotheism, which negated all idolatrous religion, continued through the writing of the Bible that laid foundations for literature and poetry in the ancient world, and later with the writing of the Talmud, whose influence on the development of law and justice in the Western world is gradually becoming clear. In the modern era, especially in the 19th and 20th century, Jews continued to make a massive contribution to the development of science, economics, and culture, a contribution measured, for instance, by the unprecedented number of Jewish Nobel Prize laureates. The Jewish theater must continue to be part of this tradition of continuously demanding progress. It must therefore be a laboratory for radical thinking. It must be a laboratory for subversive oppositional ideas. It must cast doubt upon every establishment, every regime, and every idea. It must protest against every injustice and support all those whose rights are infringed. It must be both far-seeing and deep-seeing, without bias, without shame, out of an aspiration to decode human nature, out of an aspiration to bring about a true tikkun olam, world reform. And indeed, not by chance we usually use the term tikkun olam, world reform, and not tikkun ha'olam ha'yehudi, which means the reform of the Jewish people. This choice expresses a trend embedded in our collective subconscious as Jews, and reflects our desire to be part of a global stream that encompasses the whole world as our field of activity. As I have contended earlier, the global stream will only be of value side by side with the particularist stream. For 2,000 years, our particular culture was mainly religious. And only in the end of the 19th century, with the inception of Zionism, was it joined by clear nationalist elements. It was in the wake of the Holocaust and the establishment of the State of Israel that these nationalist elements became the main thrust of our particular culture. It is still unclear whether, as many predict, the globalization process will actually weaken nationalism in the world. If it does, then the centrality of the State of Israel in the Jewish culture will become weakened.